Twilight Fables, where the forgotten grow teeth and old tales rot beautifully. Tonight we begin the story of a sister's silence and the brothers she tried to save, one stitch at a time. Long ago, before the skies went silent, the kingdom of Vale was a place of harmony. The rivers hummed, the stones sang, and birds carved hymns into the sky with their wings. The people of Vale believed the land itself was alive, breathing gently through its forests and whispering wisdom through the wind. But that was before the Queen came back from the lake, before the curse. Now the air lay still and thick, like a breath held too long. The birds no longer sang, the trees leaned away from the sun, and the kingdom forgot how to dream. In the tallest tower of the eastern keep, Elira sat hunched over a bundle of green-black nettles, her fingers raw and blistered, lips sealed tight in the silence she had sworn never to break. Once a princess, now a ghost in her own castle, Elira wove shirts from pain and patience and poison, each stitch one more cry she would never utter. 12 shirts, that was the price, one for each brother. The curse had come like smoke in the night. One moment, her brothers had laughed and danced around the fire, golden-haired and full of stories and war songs. The next, they were gone, nothing but feathers left behind, and a gust of wind that smelled like blood and violets. She had seen them only days later, perched along the edge of the western cliffs, white swans with black eyes and wings too long for their bodies. At first, she had called out to them, then screamed, then wept, and then they came to her, not as brothers, but as watchers. They came every full moon, landing on the crumbling tower ledge, silent, still, and wrong. Their presence filled the tower like a sickness. They stood too still, heads cocked too sharply, eyes too dark, and though they said nothing, she knew they remembered. Sometimes they would twitch or claw the stone. Once one of them opened its beak and let out a long, low moan, not like a bird, but like something drowning. That one had been Lauren, her eldest brother, the one who used to braid her hair and chase monsters from under her bed. Now he watched her like she was the monster. Elira bled onto the nettles. Again, her hands were trembling. The fibres, pulled from the deep wood glen, were soaked in a faint, oily venom that turned her fingertips green. The forest where they grew had been abandoned for centuries, a place even the wolves refused to tread. But she went anyway. She always went, because the shirts had to be woven in silence and agony, or the curse would never lift. That was the cost. Silence and pain and time, so much time. She had completed 5, 7 more to go. Elira once had a voice like a bell, bright and full, able to fill the throne room with light, even on the darkest days. Her father had said her voice was the last good thing his dead queen had left him. Now, her voice belonged to something else. The Hollow Sister, No one remembered her real name. She had been the first daughter of Vale, born generations before Elira, before even the birds sang over the spired towers. She had drowned in the mirror lake, or so the stories claimed, slipped beneath the glassy water in a dress of reeds and regret. Some said she was banished, others said she had gone willingly into the depths. But one thing was certain, she had returned, not in body, no, her face never appeared in windows or water, but her presence soaked into the mortar of the keep, hissed through the reeds along the riverbank. Her laughter echoed through empty corridors at night, and once Elira saw her own reflection grin back with someone else's teeth. That was the day her voice disappeared. It had slipped from her mouth like a thread cut too short. One moment she could sing, the next, nothing. Her throat burned when she tried, but the pain wasn't physical. It was deeper, like a string had snapped in her soul. The hollow sister had taken it, not to silence her, but to wear it. Some nights Elira dreamt of a shadow standing at the foot of her bed, tall, pale, dressed in dripping silk, her own voice murmuring lullabies from its mouth. She would awaken with tears in her eyes, the words of a forgotten song clawing at her tongue. Still, she did not speak. She could not. The curse demanded silence. Elira paused to wrap her hands in strips of old linen. Blood oozed through almost immediately, soaking into the cursed shirt. That was good. Pain bound the magic stronger. Through the open window, the wind changed. The sky had shifted from dusk to black, and the clouds hung like bruises across the moon. She smelled feathers, wet moss, ozone. They were coming, the swans, a hiss of wind, then a flurry of white. One by one, they landed on the tower's edge. 12 great beasts, feathers like snow, eyes like tar. They did not speak, but they stared. One shifted closer, claws scraping stone. She met its eyes and saw a flicker of something beneath the surface. It was Ilan, the fifth-born, her harpist, the brother who once refused to kill spiders because he believed every life was sacred. Now he looked at her like prey. Elira lifted the half-finished shirt. They froze, their heads tilted in unison. She had learned this early. The shirts pacified them, barely. When she worked on them, they stilled, but when she stopped, they came closer, not to hurt her, not yet, but to watch. The curse was layered, not just a transformation, not just a silencing. It was a trap. Each day, Elira remained silent. Her brothers stayed bound to their monstrous swan forms. Each shirt she finished anchored them a little more to humanity, but not completely. She could see it in their eyes. The longer they remained birds, the more their minds frayed. Each moon they returned, they seemed less like brothers and more like things born of air and hunger. She feared what they would become if she failed. She feared more what they would become if she succeeded, because the shirts weren't cures. They were masks, human skin stitched over something that no longer remembered how to bleed. Outside, a whisper of wings broke the silence. The air thickened. One of the swans let out a low, vibrating croak. Another clacked its beak. The sound was rhythmic, like a clock ticking. Elira stood slowly, her knees aching. She approached the largest swan, Lauren the first, and held out her hand. He did not recoil. He bent his head, letting her fingers rest against the top of his skull. Beneath the feathers, she felt a pulse, fast, erratic, alive. She let her hand fall, turned away, sat again. The swans did not leave. They never left until dawn. They watched her all night, always watching, like sentries, like beasts, waiting for a bell to toll, like brothers, trying to remember what that word meant. Far below, under the castle's deepest foundations, a ripple moved through the earth. Dust fell from the ceiling in soft clouds. Something ancient shifted in its sleep. The hollow sister stirred. She felt the silence above, the pain, the sacrifice. She smiled, because Elira had misunderstood the rules of the curse. Silence was not the key, it was the door, and soon it would open in the glen beyond the castle, where the nettles grew like veins across the forest floor. Something else moved, a deer with too many eyes, a shadow with hands but no face. The deep wood was changing, rotting from the inside. Every time Elira plucked nettles, the ground grew warmer, the trees pulsed. A cost was being paid, but it was not hers alone. Elira finished the sixth shirt as the sun rose behind the tower. Her hands were shaking, blood pooled beneath her fingernails. Her eyes stung with exhaustion. The swans leapt from the tower one by one, wings splitting the air, their cries shrill and jagged. Ilan lingered. He stepped forward, just once, then opened his beak and hissed. It was not a bird sound, it was almost a word. Elira's heart stopped. Then he turned, flung himself into the sky, and vanished. She did not rest. The next shirt had to be started immediately. The hollow sister was watching, and the swans were forgetting what it meant to be human. The forest did not sleep. Even when the sun reached its peak and cast jagged shadows through the branches, the deep wood glen remained dim, as if it held its breath under a sky no longer trusted. Trees knotted around one another like limbs in a mass grave, and the soil beneath Elira's feet was soft, not with rot, but with something worse, memory. It remembered every drop of blood that had fed it. Elira stepped over a tangle of black roots and knelt at the edge of a narrow brook, its water still and colourless. The air smelled of copper and mould. In her satchel hung a sack of dried blood and wool, the remnants of her last gathering. She would need more soon. She always needed more. The nettles grew in the deeper reaches, not the kind that left welts or rashes. These were the old kind, the ones that whispered when brushed, whose barbs curved inward and drew not just blood, but warmth from the fingers. She had once gathered them in gloves, but the curse had rejected that. The pain had to be real, or the magic would not bind. Elira unwrapped her bandages. Her hands looked like they belonged to someone twice her age, bones jutting, nails cracked, fingers stained with a permanent greenish bruise that no amount of washing could remove. She dipped one hand into the water. Cold stabbed up her wrist like a blade. Her breath caught, but she said nothing. She never said anything. Behind her, the forest shifted. She had left the tower before sunrise, slipping past the sleeping guards and the rusting iron gates with practiced ease. No one stopped her anymore. No one asked questions. After all, she did not answer. She had not uttered a word in years. Most believed she was mute from birth. Others whispered of madness. A few claimed she had never existed at all. Only the swans knew the truth, and they were forgetting it. The deep wood glen was older than Vale, older than the first king's tomb, older than the bones beneath the keep. Legend said it had once been a cathedral of trees, sacred and bright, where the first queen spoke to the stars and named the winds. But the Hollow Sister had come here once, and the forest had never recovered. The nettles waited in a sunless hollow, surrounded by stones shaped like ribs. Elira descended slowly, feeling the soft ground cling to her boots. The plants grew in clusters, their leaves trembling, as if trying to flee their own thorns. She knelt. The sting began immediately. The barbs pierced deep, releasing a bitter sap that numbed her skin and made her teeth ache. Her breath fogged before her face, as if the air itself recoiled. She worked slowly, methodically, ignoring the pain. Every motion was ritual. For each brother, she had to gather a bundle large enough to weave a shirt that would cover the wingspan of a beast. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was what came next. The shirt didn't just need to be made, it needed to be given, draped over the cursed form at just the right moment, between dusk and dawn, as the body flickered between man and beast. And if she failed, if even one feather remained beneath the fabric, the curse would not break. It would anchor forever. A low crack sounded behind her. Elira froze. Not a bird, not wind. She turned slowly. At the edge of the hollow stood a creature. At first, she thought it was a deer. Long legs, pale body, antlers like withered branches. But then it blinked, not with lids, with skin. A ripple moved across its face. Its jaw hinged in the wrong direction. She dropped the nettles and stood. The creature took a step forward. Its hooves left no mark on the soil. Its antlers twitched, not with nerves, but with awareness. It knew her. It had been waiting. The deep wood was changing. The Hollow Sister's presence was seeping into its roots. Elira backed away, blood dripping from her hands, her mouth still sealed. The creature did not follow. Instead, it opened its jaw and let out a sound. A song, not words, not melody, but her voice. It sang with her voice, high and trembling, like a lullaby she had forgotten. She turned and fled, crashing through the trees, with nettles clutched in her arms, the echo of her stolen voice ringing in her ears. She didn't stop until the castle rose ahead of her, its spires jagged against a bruised sky. The swans were already circling overhead, white streaks against the darkening clouds. They flew low, wings barely clearing the turrets, as if circling prey. Elira stumbled through the servants' gate, unnoticed and unchallenged, and made her way back to the tower. No one looked at her anymore. No one saw her. She was the girl who never spoke, the silent ghost of Vale, and they feared her silence more than they feared the sky. The tower welcomed her like a grave. Inside, the air was always colder, the stone always damp, candles refused to burn long, and mirrors clouded for no reason. Elira dumped the nettles onto the work table and collapsed to her knees, breath shuddering, hands numb. The creature in the woods had sung with her voice. How had it found her? How had it used her? A scrape of claws against stone made her turn. Lauren stood on the ledge, firstborn, leader, monster. His wings were tucked close, but his feathers twitched in agitation. His head tilted, beak barely open. She stood, bloody hands raised, trying to show him the new bundle, the proof of her suffering. He did not move. Instead, his neck curled in a slow, unnatural arc. Then he stepped inside. He had never done that before, not once in all the years of silence. The swans landed, always on the ledge, always just outside, never in. But Lauren entered the tower, one step, two. His claws clicked against the floor. Elira stepped back. He kept coming. He was too large. His wings brushed the walls. His beak glinted in the dim light. His eyes were wrong. Not empty, not lost, curious and hungry. He came to a stop just before the table, looked down at the nettles. Then his beak opened and something fell out, a feather, long, grey, twisted. She recognised it. It was hers, from her old cloak, back before the curse, back when she had sewn her own embroidery, shaped birds and stars from scraps. The feather had been on her shoulder. Now it lay at her feet. A gift, a warning. She didn't know. Lauren turned and exited the tower with one swift leap, his wings catching the air in silence. The others followed. She did not sleep that night. She sat by the fire, burning the nettles dry, grinding them into thread, weaving with broken fingers and aching bones. The creature in the woods, Lauren stepping inside. Her feather returned. It was all unravelling. She could feel it, not just the curse, the world, like a fabric stretched too thin, like a shirt with one thread too many. At dawn, she collapsed on the floor beside the sixth shirt, finished, bloody, beautiful, her eyes closed for only a moment. But in that moment, she dreamed a lake, still, black, a woman in the water, face like hers, eyes too wide, too deep, and a voice, her voice, singing, calling, only 6 more. Elira woke with blood in her mouth, her tongue burned. Far below, the hollow sister smiled in the dark. The silence was almost broken, and when it was, she would rise again, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a queen. The castle bells rang hollow. They tolled every morning, every dusk, and again at midnight. The sound once carried warmth, marking time between prayer and feast. Now it sounded like a warning, a knell from a forgotten place, echoing off walls that hadn't seen true celebration in a decade. Elira listened to it from her tower window, her fingers twitching over the worn hem of her dress. Her lips moved, silently, mouthing a prayer she didn't remember learning. She had not slept since finishing the 6th shirt. There had been no time. There was never time. Time, like silence, had become a weapon. Not hers, not the gods, but hers. The hollow sister, whose presence was pressing more firmly against the fabric of veil each day, stitching herself into shadows, into mirrors, into the minds of the people who no longer knew what was real. Elira had seen a guard bow to a puddle once. Another had offered food to a blank wall, whispering, "Your Grace." When she passed a courtier in the hallway the day before, they had called her by a different name. "Good morning, my queen." Not a jest, not sarcasm, recognition that frightened her more than the swan's return. She rose from the stone floor, dragging herself back to the table where the 7th shirt waited like a gaping wound. The dried nettle thread coiled in tight, barbed loops, hissing when she touched it. Her hands were worse now, green to the knuckle, skin paper thin, bleeding at the joints. But the pain kept her sane. Pain was proof that she still belonged to her body, still herself, still real. She worked through the day, the castle below moving in eerie rhythm. From her tower, she watched maids walk backward down the courtyard steps. She saw the cook carrying a silver tray piled high with flowers and meat into the lake. He stood in the shallows until the water reached his waist, then knelt and placed the tray on the surface. It did not sink. It floated. Then something took it. She saw no hands, no face, but the tray vanished, and the cook turned and walked back inside as if nothing had happened. By sunset, Elira had finished a sleeve, only a sleeve. The work was slower now. The thread knotted of its own accord. The nettles refused to soften, and the needles bent when she tried to force them. She whispered apologies to the cloth, not aloud, of course, but with her eyes, her hands, her silence. She did not see the swan until its beak scraped against the window pane. She turned sharply, blood dripping down her arm. It was Ilan again, but something was wrong. He was inside the tower already, standing just beyond the threshold of the stairs, his wings folded tight, beak wet with what she hoped was water. Her eyes widened. How? They never climbed the stairs. They couldn't. But he was there, head low, chest rising too fast. She stepped back. He followed. His feet left smears on the stone, streaks that pulsed faintly in the dim light. Not blood, oil. She reached for the half-finished shirt and held it up like a ward. Ilan stopped. The beak clicked once. Then slowly, his head tilted, not in that eerie, animal way, but like a man who had just heard his name called after years in silence. His eyes focused, just for a second, and then he collapsed. Elira rushed to him, unsure whether to touch or flee. His body shuddered, convulsed. His feathers twitched violently, as if trying to crawl away. He let out a strangled, choking sound. Not quite a cry, not quite a scream. And then he changed. Right there on the cold stone floor, Ilan's wings shrank, bones cracked, sinew snapped, and flesh reformed in violent bursts of motion. When it was done, he lay naked and trembling, curled like a child, his blonde hair matted with feathers, his eyes rolled back. Elira covered him with a shawl and knelt beside him, tears hot in her eyes. She had not placed the shirt on him. He had changed without it. The realization struck her like ice in the gut. The transformation had not been broken. It had been undone, incomplete, twisted. Her silence alone had not protected the magic. Something had interfered, or corrupted it, or stolen it. Ilan's eyes opened slowly. They were not the same. His pupils were too large, his irises too pale. He blinked once, then looked at her. Recognition flickered. Elira! Her breath hitched. It was the first voice from her brothers she'd heard in nearly 7 years. Elira, he whispered again. I was dreaming of wings and water. She pressed a finger to his lips, not in affection, in warning. He shouldn't be able to speak. Not yet. Not until the shirt was complete. He smiled at her touch, then bit her finger. She yanked her hand back, heart thundering. He chuckled softly, then sobbed. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm still hungry. Elira locked him in the lower chamber, barring the door with 3 iron rods and placing the unfinished shirt outside the room like a charm. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He only laughed quietly in the dark, the sound echoing through the stone. You'll finish it for me, won't you, sister? He called. So I can wear your pain forever. She fled back upstairs. That night, she dreamed of mirrors. Every mirror in the castle, but none showed her reflection. Only the hollow sister, sometimes with Elira's face, sometimes with no face at all, just a mouth, open, singing, with her voice. In the days that followed, the castle began to change more rapidly. A chambermaid was found humming a song no one remembered teaching her, and weeping blood. The steward refused to speak at all. locking himself in the stables and painting crude symbols across the doors. In black pitch, a priest tried to burn the altar, claiming it had started speaking to him in a voice older than salt. Each time Elira passed the lake, she saw things moving beneath the surface, shadows with limbs, smiles without mouths, birds that never flew. The swans grew erratic. They landed closer, watched longer. On the fourth day, one of them screamed, truly screamed, as if its bones were melting. Elira nearly spoke, but she bit her tongue until blood flooded her throat. The seventh shirt was finished on the sixth night. She dared not try to place it. Not yet. Not after what happened with Ilan. He had quieted in his room, stopped calling her, stopped eating. The silence frightened her more than his hunger. At dawn, the hollow sister came to her, not as a dream, not as a shadow, as a girl, standing just inside the tower chamber, wearing a dress of black reeds, her skin too smooth, her eyes too round. She looked like Elira, but not quite, like someone had drawn her from memory and missed a few details. The smile was too wide, the hands too long, and when she spoke, it was Elira's own voice. "Look what you've made me," she said sweetly. Elira did not move. The hollow sister stepped closer. "I've worn your voice for years now. I've given it to children, to birds, to the wind. But now I want your face." She raised one hand. Her nails had grown into black thorns. "I'll be the sister who spoke, who suffered, who saved them." Elira reached slowly behind her, found the eighth shirt, held it like a weapon. The hollow sister hissed. The room darkened. 1,000 moths poured from the chimney, swirling like smoke, their wings etched with tiny eyes. By the time they cleared, the hollow sister was gone. Only her laughter remained. It echoed for hours. Elira did not cry. She wept without tears, without sobs. She bled into the shirt. She wove through dawn, and the next, and the next, because there was no choice. Only silence, only pain, only 6 more to go, and a kingdom that was already beginning to forget who the real princess had ever been. By the 7th year of silence, even the stone began to forget her name. The tower walls no longer echoed her footsteps. The stairs groaned only when she bled on them, and the wind, once playful and cold, grew still whenever she stepped outside. The very air of Vale seemed to hold its breath in her presence. Below, the castle was rotting from the inside out. The court had changed. Elira had always known they were fragile things, men and women powdered in perfume and illusion, but now they looked like wax figures half melted in the sun. They spoke slowly, repeating phrases as if learning a language they were forgetting. They bowed too low, smiled too long, and more of them had begun calling her Your Majesty, not Princess, Queen, but not their queen. Theirs had returned weeks ago, or so they believed. Elira stood hidden in the corridor behind the throne room's viewing arch, watching the court convene in solemn quiet. The hollow sister sat on the throne, dressed in black silk and crowned in weeping willow branches. Her face was Elira's, but pale as chalk and too symmetrical, like a mask carved to mock her. And yet no one questioned her presence, not the king, her own father, who now looked through her as if peering into fog, not the generals, who bowed with trembling hands, not the old nursemaid who once swore she'd know Elira's heartbeat, even in death. They all knelt to the hollow sister, and she spoke with Elira's voice, perfectly, tenderly, and when she laughed, the court laughed too, though their eyes did not shine. Elira wanted to scream, to cry, to shatter mirrors and claw her face from her skull, but she said nothing. She walked quietly back to the tower as the hollow sister hummed a lullaby Elira's mother used to sing, the one about the boy who turned into a tree so his sisters would always find their way home. The 8th shirt took longer than any of the others. The thread knotted of its own will. The pattern frayed mid-stitch. The thorns drew more than blood now. They drew memories. Each time her fingers pierced skin, she saw flickers of her life before the silence. Her brothers teaching her to climb trees, Ilan building her a swing from braided rope and old banners, Lauren wrapping her in his coat when she cried at night, all of it washed in red. The deep-wood glen's poison was seeping into the fabric of her work and into her mind. On the 3rd night of sewing, a raven flew into her chamber. Its wings were cracked and its eyes glowed faint blue. It dropped a bundle at her feet, a lock of blonde hair twisted with a silver ring, one of her brother's. She reached for it and felt it vanish like smoke. The bird laughed, not a call, a laugh. Then it shattered into black petals and vanished through the wall. The hollow sister visited again. This time she crawled from the fireplace, her dress smoking, her teeth clicking in rhythm with the tower's heartbeat. "You're wasting yourself," she said, circling Elira like a starving cat, bleeding for a family that no longer remembers you. She ran her fingers through Elira's hair. "Do you know what Ilan whispered last night? He said the air tasted better without you in it." Elira did not flinch. She focused on her stitching. Another row, another burn. The hollow sister hissed, "You should thank me. I'm freeing you from this, from them, from her." She pointed out the window, toward the lake. "Do you remember your mother's face? I do. I see it every time I look at you." She crouched beside Elira, her hands now soaked in ink. "You're going to fail, and when you do, I'll be all that's left." Then she kissed Elira's cheek, leaving behind a smudge of ash, and vanished into the floor. The 8th shirt was finished at sunrise. Elira had not slept in 5 days. Her hands were no longer hands. They were bone wrapped in bark. Her lips were cracked. Her hair had begun to fall out, and yet she smiled, because only 4 shirts remained, she descended into the chamber where Ilan waited. The room smelled of salt and feathers. He crouched in the far corner, nude and shivering, wings beginning to regrow across his shoulders, uninvited. The transformation was fighting to reclaim him. "Too slow," he rasped. "You're too slow, Elira." She held the shirt out. He stared at it like it was a flame, then laughed. "You think that will fix me? Do you think I want to go back?" She stepped forward. He lunged. She dropped the shirt and raised her arm to block him. He stopped an inch from her throat, his breath foul with rot, and screamed into her face, then collapsed again. Elira dressed him in silence. The shirt pulsed briefly, and the wings faded, but only for now. The next night, Lauren did not arrive with the others. 11 swans circled the tower. One was missing. When Elira climbed the parapet and peered into the trees, she saw a trail of white feathers leading toward the forest. She followed them without hesitation. The deep wood had changed. There were no paths anymore, no moonlight, no birds, only trees that bent toward her and ground that pulsed beneath her steps. She followed the feathers for hours, deeper and deeper, until the silence grew too loud. And then she found him, Lauren, half transformed, limbs twisted, eyes blind with rage, surrounded by bones, not animal bones, children's bones. Elira fell to her knees. Lauren turned. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then shame, then hunger. He rushed her. She did not run. She did not scream. She held up the 9th shirt and pressed it to his chest. The impact knocked her flat. His body contorted, ribs snapping, wings folding inward. And when the dust cleared, he was human again, naked, bleeding, and weeping. "I tried to stay away," he sobbed. "I tried to fly east, but she called me back." Elira cradled him like a child and began to cry without sound. By the time they returned, the tower had changed. Its stone was darker, the air was thicker, the sky above it churned like boiling ink. 3 shirts remained, and the hollow sister now walked the halls of the keep with open praise. A parade was planned in her honour. The kingdom was hers already. Elira did not attend. She spent the next 2 days harvesting nettles, her arms shaking, legs barely able to carry her. She worked in the shadows of the deep wood, which now spoke in children's voices, and laughed when she fell. She returned with a full satchel and an injury. Something had bitten her in the glen. It had no face, only a mouth, and it whispered, "Mother says stop trying." The 10th shirt was a blur. She sewed through fever. Her vision doubled. The walls moved. When it was done, she tried to rise and collapsed. For the first time, she dreamed of herself. Not the past, not the hollow sister. Just Elira, in a white dress, floating above the lake. She opened her mouth and screamed, but no sound came. When she woke, the shirt lay crumpled in her lap, but it was warm. and it pulsed like a heart. She has just 2 left, and her voice is beginning to itch in her throat, like it wants to crawl out, like it belongs to someone else, like she's holding back something alive. Elira awoke, choking on feathers. A single plume lay across her tongue, bitter and dry, curled like a dead leaf. She clawed it out, coughing blurred, her throat raw and trembling. The fire had long gone out. Her chamber was cold, lit only by the dim grey glow that leaked through cracks in the tower stone. The 10th shirt lay finished beside her, folded like a burial cloth. Only 2 remained, but she was unravelling faster than the curse. When she looked at her hands, she didn't recognise them. The skin had taken on a greenish hue, the veins raised like twine beneath paper-thin flesh. Blisters had burst along her knuckles, and the nettle poison no longer burned. It welcomed her now, like something returning to its roots. She feared what would happen when she completed the 12th, not because she doubted it would break the curse, but because she feared what else might be set free with it. The hollow sister was growing stronger by the day. The castle had surrendered fully. She saw it in the way the guards moved, stepping in perfect, clockwork rhythm, too precise to be natural. The servants had stopped using their own names. They answered only to numbers now, and none of them blinked. The hollow sister's reach was no longer subtle. She walked openly through the corridors, her smile a slash of colourless light, her dress always wet around the hem. She did not hide from Elira any more. She waved, and the kingdom waved with her. The 11th shirt began to fight her, not just the thorns and thread, but the shirt itself. It bled. Each time she pierced it with her needle, dark fluid oozed from the seams. The fabric twitched under her fingers, pulsing like flesh, and once, when she dropped it in exhaustion, it breathed. She should have burned it, but she couldn't, because 11 was for Beric, her youngest brother, the one who never grew out of his lisp, the one who carved little wooden birds to hang from her window, the one who had screamed loudest when the transformation came, and the one who hadn't visited the tower in 4 moons. She climbed the northern watchtower that night. The sky was restless, torn by streaks of pale lightning, with no thunder to follow. Rain clung to the clouds, but never fell. The wind moved in circles. She waited until the others came, 9 swans circling above, one missing, then another, only 8. Elira stepped forward and scanned the horizon, a flicker of white in the trees. Then a sound. Not wings, not wind, a howl. She turned toward the sound and froze. 2 figures moved beneath the trees, one crawling on hands that weren't quite hands, the other perched atop its back, long limbs wrapped around its neck. She saw a flash of feathers, a glint of her brother's eyes, and then the hollow sister turned and smiled at her from the forest edge. She was riding Beric, no longer a swan, not yet a man, something in between, and he was laughing. Elira ran until her lungs split, her feet slick with mud, hands torn by thorns. She didn't remember falling, only waking beneath the old oak where her mother was buried. There was a crown of feathers at its base, and a message carved into the trunk in blood. 11 is too late. She finished the 11th shirt with tears in her eyes. It screamed when she touched it, but she didn't stop. She wrapped it tightly, folded it twice, and placed it in the satchel with the others. She was losing them, one by one, not to death, but to something worse, something that wore their faces and remembered their pain, but not their names. The lake had begun to rise. Every day, the water crept closer to the castle walls, swallowing the gardens, the statues, the graves. No one spoke of it. The Hollow Sister called it a blessing, a tide of rebirth, she said, smiling before the court, a cleansing for the new kingdom. Elira, watching from the rafters, clutched the final bundle of nettles in her hands. She had gone to the deep wood for them herself. They had grown in a ring around her own footprints, and they whispered as she plucked them, "Speak, and we'll go silent." The final shirt would be for Kyle, her second eldest, the one who had carried her when she broke her leg as a child, who had once stood between her and a charging boar with nothing but a branch in hand. He had not landed on the tower in 2 moons, but she felt him in the walls, in the floorboards, watching, waiting. The Hollow Sister appeared the night Elira began the 12th. She came through the window this time, dripping with black water, her eyes too bright. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, kneeling beside her. "You could speak now. End it. No one would blame you. No one remembers you. They remember me." She placed a pale hand over Elira's own. "Let me carry this burden. Let me finish your story." Elira stared down at her needle. The Hollow Sister leaned in closer. "You're tired. Let go. Speak my name. That's all it takes." Elira blinked, once, twice, then picked up the thread and began to stitch. The Hollow Sister hissed and vanished into smoke. On the 3rd night, the storm began. Not rain, not wind, just sound, a low rumbling that never stopped. The sky tore itself in half, bleeding green light. The birds dropped dead mid-flight. The water in the castle wells turned black and boiled. The people danced in the streets, singing songs in languages no one taught them. The Hollow Sister stood on the roof of the chapel, her arms raised, her mouth open, letting the storm enter her. She grew taller, her smile widened, the crown of willow branches turned to bone. Elira worked without stopping. Her hands blistered anew, her hair fell out in clumps. The room blurred, time broke. She saw herself as a child, then as something older than the castle, older than the sky. She saw 12 birds, torn from the same egg, screaming for light. She saw the Hollow Sister watching, always watching, from beneath the lake. waiting for someone to say her name, to remember her, to give her voice. And then it was done. The 12th shirt, completed, folded, sealed with her final drop of blood. Elira collapsed, her body convulsed, and she nearly spoke, but she did not. She held the silence like a sword and waited. The final night arrived with no moon. The swans circled above. Only 7 remained. 5 had vanished. Elira climbed the tower steps, each one slower than the last. She carried the bundle across her back, and at the top she saw them, the 7 swans, and one figure in white, standing at the centre of the tower, human-shaped but faceless, its arms outstretched, its chest hollow. The hollow sister stepped forward from the shadows behind it. "This is the last time," she whispered. "Say my name, and I will stop." Elira stepped past her, unwrapped the shirts, one by one. She threw them into the wind, and the wind caught them. Each shirt struck a swan mid-air, and the air shattered. Not sound, not light, something else. A truth being torn open, a wound in the sky. The swans screamed, wings tore, bones cracked, voices returned. 12 in total, even the missing ones, some broken, some not whole, but all speaking. And then the hollow sister shrieked. Her body twisted, the lake water rose like hands, and she screamed Elira's name in reverse. Ariel! Not a curse, not a plea, but a claim. She was Elira, or had once been, or would be again. Elira stood on the parapet, looked down at the kingdom, at her brothers, now crawling from the grass, whole and ruined, and blinking like newborns. And she finally opened her mouth. The first sound was a gasp, then a sob, then a single word, but not the hollow sister's name, her own, Elira. And the hollow sister screamed and split apart. Her body became a swarm of feathers and moths and water. Her voice broke into 1,000 fragments and was gone. The sky cleared. The storm ended. The silence did not, because Elira had nothing left to say. They buried the hollow sister without a body. There was nothing left to inter. No bones, no blood, no skin. Just a circle of scorched stone on the tower where Elira had spoken her name and shattered the sky. The priests refused to bless it. The court called it cursed. The servants wouldn't clean it, and the birds would not fly over it. Even the wind swerved away, but Elira stayed. She sat beside the blackened stones for 3 nights without food or fire. The shredded remains of the final shirt draped across her knees like a funeral shroud. She didn't cry, not because she was strong, because she didn't know how. Her silence had been a shield for so long that words now felt like broken glass, rattling behind her teeth. Her voice was her own again, but it had nowhere to go. The only people who might listen could no longer understand her. Her brothers had returned, yes, but not whole. Of the 12, Only 6 still bore full human form. The others... Beric had no eyes, only pale sockets that wept salt water. Joran's hands had never fully regrown, talons twitching where fingers once were. Ilan flinched at every noise and refused to sleep beneath a roof. One brother, Mirik, would not speak at all, crawling the castle halls on all fours, feathers sprouting anew from his back each morning. They were alive, but they were not free. Not yet. Lauren was the first to speak to her. He found her on the 4th day, still seated in the tower, her fingers raw and bleeding from clutching the nettle thread too tightly. "You should come down," he said, voice rough with disuse. She didn't look at him. He sat beside her, not touching. "I remember everything now." She didn't respond. "I remember the curse, the flight, the hunger. I remember the hollow sister pretending to be you. I remember the lake whispering to us at night, calling us by wrong names." Elira closed her eyes. "I remember the moment I forgot who I was. It felt like drowning in my own feathers." Finally she spoke, quietly. "I'm sorry." He turned to her. "No, you saved us, at the cost of everything. I'm the one who's sorry." She looked at him for the first time, eyes sunken but clear. "I didn't save all of you." "No," he agreed. "But we're not gone. Not yet." He placed something in her lap, a single, unblemished feather. It pulsed with warmth. "Come down, Elira. The curse is broken, but the kingdom isn't healed, and they only remember one queen." The court met again, a week later, not in the throne room, which still stank of salt and rot, but in the old chapel, which had remained untouched through the years of chaos. Elira entered alone, wearing a dress stitched from the remnants of the 12 shirts, soft green and brown, thorn-lined but beautiful. No one stopped her. They parted before her like shadows, fleeing the sun. Her father sat at the altar's head, eyes empty, beard overgrown. When she knelt before him, he flinched. "You," he whispered. "You're not her." "I'm not," she agreed. "She's gone." The room shivered. "You left," he accused. "You vanished. You didn't speak. You let it happen." "I saved them," she replied. "And the kingdom." She looked at the nobles lining the pews, at the women with cracked smiles and empty gazes, at the men with black sap staining their cuffs. "It's not a kingdom anymore." She left the same night, not in disgrace, not in fear, but in mourning. The people did not cheer, they did not cry. They simply watched as she walked through the gate, her brothers trailing behind her like broken ghosts. 12 now, each bearing a different shape. Some limped, some crawled. One flew above them in slow, quiet circles. None of them looked back. The forest had changed again. The deep wood glen no longer whispered, it breathed. The trees leaned in together, branches entwined like fingers. Vines hung heavy with black fruit that smelled like ash and honey. The old trails were gone, but the lake remained. It It had risen higher than ever, touching the forest's edge, and in its still centre, a spire, black, glossy, bone-like, the Hollow Sister's tomb, or perhaps her true form. Elira stood at its edge and waited. Lauren came to her side. "You knew," he said. "You knew she wasn't just a shadow." "I think," Elira whispered, "she was the part of me that broke when I stopped speaking." He didn't answer, because he knew she was right. They stayed in the deep wood for 3 nights. The brothers built shelters from reeds and bark. They slept beneath stars that pulsed like wounds. They did not speak much. There was little left to say, but on the 3rd night, Beric approached her. His face had healed, mostly, though his eyes were still pale as pearls. "I hear her," he said. Elira froze. "In the water. She's not screaming anymore. What is she doing?" "She's singing." Elira turned toward the lake. Wind stirred across the surface, and with it came a sound, not harsh or cruel, sweet, gentle, and terribly familiar. Her voice, but older. She walked into the lake the next morning, not to drown, to remember. The water parted for her like a curtain, drawing her deeper into its centre. The black spire rose taller now, its shape not solid, but shifting, like glass remembering its original mould. When she reached it, a door opened, without hinges, without sound. She stepped inside. The Hollow Sister waited within, but she did not smile. She looked like Elira, older, tired, sewn together with the same nettle thread Elira had once bled into. "You came back," she said. Elira nodded. "You're not angry," the Hollow Sister observed. "I am," Elira said, "but not at you." She stepped forward and placed her hand against the Hollow Sister's chest. There was no heartbeat, but there was warmth. "You were born from my silence," Elira whispered, "but I never taught you how to stop screaming." The Hollow Sister blinked. "I'm sorry," she said. "So am I," Elira replied, and then she embraced her. The spire groaned, the water around them trembled, and the Hollow Sister vanished, not torn apart, not destroyed, simply healed. Elira emerged alone. The lake receded at her feet, the forest bowed, and the sky, for the first time in years, turned blue. Back at the camp, the brothers were waiting, and something in them had changed. They looked younger, lighter, no feathers, no claws, no shriveled wings, just men. And one girl, Elira, smiled. They smiled back, and for the first time since they were children, they all spoke her name. Together, Elira. The peace lasted less than a month. At first, Elira believed the silence that followed the Hollow Sister's disappearance was true silence, earned, not endured. Her brothers began to laugh again. Beric carved birds from wood as he used to. Ilan took to the trees, singing old ballads to no one in particular. Merrick even spoke 3 words, whispered at dawn, but the forest did not join them in healing. The deep wood had merely grown patient, and something else had taken root in the hollow sister's wake. Something that had always been there, buried beneath her borrowed voice. It began with the animals. The foxes stopped crossing the streams. Deer were found with their hooves turned backwards. Birds flew in circles until they dropped from the sky, twitching with their beaks wide open, gasping for sound that had no shape. And then, one morning, a man emerged from the forest's eastern edge. He was naked, trembling, and blind, but not from injury, from removal. Where his eyes should have been, nettles bloomed. Elira rushed to him, but before she could ask a single question, he spoke a phrase she hadn't heard in years. "My queen wears the silence well." Then he screamed and burst into crows. That night, Elira returned alone to the tower ruin where the hollow sister had been destroyed. She found nothing but scorched stone and a single mirror, unbroken, standing upright in the ash. Her reflection looked back, but it wasn't her. It was her mother, or what might have been her mother if she'd never died. But her eyes were hollow, and she spoke with the hollow sister's voice. "Daughter," it said, "there was never only one curse." Elira returned to camp trembling. Lauren and Kyle helped her sit. Merrick watched from a distance. Fingernails sunk deep into the bark of a dead tree. Joran had begun muttering to himself again, speaking in broken riddles that looped endlessly. Feather to flame, wing to thorn, the silence screams, but is never born. She gathered them all that evening and spoke plainly. "I think the curse was never meant to be broken, only passed on." Her brothers listened without interrupting. Ilan was the first to respond. "Passed to who?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, Elira dreamt of her mother's grave. Not the stone marker beneath the old oak tree, but the real one, the one beneath the lake. She stood on the shore, the water frozen in time, and heard a voice call out, not the hollow sister, not her own, but her mother's, singing the same lullaby from long ago. 12 sons to carry the crown, 1 daughter to bury the sound. She woke with her mouth full of black thorns. The next morning, the lake had drained halfway. At its centre, a hollow pit now yawned open, black and glistening like the inside of a wound. And from it rose something buried, a gate, iron and stone, wrapped in vines and bone, symbols carved in a language even Elira could not read, but her bones knew it, the old tongue, older than kingdoms, older than gods. Lauren argued against returning to the tower ruins. Kyle wanted to burn the gate shut, but Elira knew neither option would end it, not unless she finished what her silence had only delayed. "I have to go down," she said. "No," Ilan snapped. "We just got you back. You just got us back. We survived this." "No," she said quietly. "We paused it." She didn't tell them the truth, that the hollow sister had been a fragment, that her voice was still echoing in the space below the lake. and it was growing louder. She descended into the pit at dusk, alone. The gate opened when she pressed her hand to it. No key, no magic, just recognition. Inside, the world was made of mirrors, walls of still water, floors of black glass, reflections of herself with different eyes, different scars, different fates, and each one spoke. You abandoned them. You killed us. You should have let her finish the spell. You were always the wrong twin. That one made her stop. I have no twin, she said aloud. The mirrors laughed, and behind her, the hollow sister returned. Not twisted, not monstrous, just a girl, wearing a crown of broken reeds and nettle. Not a twin, the girl said. A mirror. They circled each other. The hollow sister no longer hissed. She no longer clawed. She only looked tired. You gave me silence, she said, but not peace. I gave you everything I had, Elira replied. No, said the hollow sister. You gave me everything you wouldn't keep. The water around them rippled, and the truth rose like mist. There had never been only 12. There had been 13, a 13th child, born under black sky and salt moon, a twin Elira had never known. One given to the lake to balance the spell that made the prince's swans. A sister no one had spoken of. A voice no one had mourned, until Elira's silence gave her shape, until Elira's curse gave her sound. You want me to free you? Elira asked. The hollow sister looked up. No, I want you to remember me. Elira stepped forward and embraced her, this time, not as an enemy, not as a reflection, but as a sister. The thorns on the hollow sister's crown softened. The mirrors around them cracked, and from the cracks spilled light. Not gold, not white, something older, something human. Elira walked out of the pit at dawn. The lake filled in behind her. The gate vanished beneath the surface, and the hollow sister's song stopped at last. That night, her brothers slept without fear, and Elira stood beneath the stars and whispered one name, not hers, not theirs, but the one never spoken. Soriel, the 13th, the forgotten, the one who gave her voice back. The name echoed long after she whispered it. Soriel, the 13th, not a curse, not a ghost, not an echo, but a sister, once torn from Elira at birth, to feed a spell no one understood. The swan curse had not been punishment, it had been payment. The silence had not been penance, it had been protection. And the hollow sister had never asked to be born. She had been a vessel, first of pain, then of voice, then of rage. Now she was gone, and Elira was alone again, but it was a new kind of alone. Not hollow, not hunted, just quiet. The deep-wood glen began to recede. The following morning, its trees uncoiled like muscles relaxing after years of tension. The sky over the lake turned clear. The birds returned, not swans, but common birds, sparrows, jays, crows. Life returned cautiously, one note at a time. Elira walked through it barefoot. The nettles no longer stung her. Where once they drew blood, now they bowed. The kingdom itself seemed to remember who she was. Or perhaps it finally forgot who she was not. Her brothers built a small home near the old oak tree, the one where their mother had been falsely buried. She was not there. Her bones had long become one with the forest, or else lost to the spell that had cost her children everything. But they built the house anyway, to mark the end, to make something real. Merrick carved the doorway with 12 birds, each twisted, beautiful, imperfect. Ilan planted rows of bitterroot, claiming they would keep ghosts from climbing in through the floorboards. Beric wrote songs again, though they were never quite happy, and Ira stitched, not nettles, not shirts, but cloth for beds, curtains for warmth, a banner over the hearth bearing the image of a swan, with its wings broken and its head held high. The people of the kingdom came eventually, not all at once, and not with torches or praise. They came like animals drawn to a spring that had been poisoned, and now, perhaps, was safe again. A few at first, stragglers, old women with children who had forgotten how to speak, young men with stories of dreams filled with feathers and screams. Elira met them without crown or blade. She taught them how to listen again, how to sew, how to be silent without being afraid. The king never returned. He had walked into the sea weeks earlier, robes trailing behind him like wings. He said nothing as he vanished beneath the waves. Some claimed he joined his queen. Others said the Hollow Sister took him back. Elira never spoke of it, and no one asked. But peace never stays, and stories do not end with silence. One night, as the fire crackled and her brothers slept, Elira dreamed again. Not of the Hollow Sister, not of the curse, but of the girl in the tower, herself, at 14, alone, bleeding into shirts, while the world forgot her. The girl stared back at her and whispered, "You're not finished." Elira woke, gasping, and the lake was glowing. She walked to its edge barefoot. The water did not ripple, but something waited beneath, not evil, not cursed, simply unresolved, because stories do not end when the curse breaks. They end when the memory does, and Elira had never let herself forget. A shape rose from the centre of the water, not Soriel, not the Hollow Sister, just light. 12 small flames, circling a 13th, larger, pulsing with rhythm like breath. Elira stepped into the lake. The water cradled her, lifted her, and the light spoke, not in sound, but in memory. It showed her the first moment of her birth. 2 daughters, one kept, one claimed. It showed her the first curse, not the one on the swan princes, but the one on the mother. A woman who begged the forest for strength to keep her family whole. A woman who sacrificed her voice for protection and passed the silence into her daughter's blood. It showed her the truth. There had never been one curse, only a cycle, and Elira was the first to survive it. When she awoke, she was standing at the lake's edge, a necklace of woven nettle around her throat. It no longer burned. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, she returned to the tower ruins with her brothers. The stone was cold, but no longer cursed. Flowers bloomed in the cracks. Birds sang in the rafters. The room where she had stitched for years now stood open to the sky. She gathered what remained of the nettle threads, ashes, feathers, and broken shards of the hollow sister's crown, and together they buried them, not as monsters, not as relics, as siblings, as story, as sacrifice. Years passed. The brothers married or wandered. Some built farms, others sailed. Meyrick disappeared into the forest and was never seen again, though his carvings showed up on trees throughout the glen for decades afterward. The house by the oak became a village, then a town. Elira stayed, not as queen, not as witch, just as Elira. Children asked her why she never left. She smiled and said, "Because I already did once, and someone had to come back." They asked about the hollow sister. She told them about the girl who sang too loudly and loved too deeply, and how no one listened until it was too late. And when they asked her about the swans, she only said they never truly flew away. On her last day, Elira walked to the lake one final time. She was old now, grey-haired, wrinkled, eyes full of both sorrow and softness. She knelt and whispered, "Soriel," and from the trees came the sound of wings. 12 of them, some white, some dark, some half-feathered, half-light. They circled once overhead and vanished. Elira died with a smile on her lips, the nettle thread still wrapped around her wrist, the last thread unbroken. Because some curses don't end, they simply rest until someone is brave enough to speak again.